Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Josh Dirksen, a game developer, graphic designer, and co-owner of Lynnvander Studios. Although he has worked on too many licenses to mention, he may be best known for his free unofficial cooperative campaign expansion for X-Wing miniatures. Josh, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Hey, James. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. We were catching up at Breakout Con in Toronto, and that's where we got to finally kind of got to meet and chat a little bit, and we talked a little bit about Snapships, which is the project that you're part of as well. So congrats on that. That campaign, I'll just say really quickly for people listening, I think I wrote down like $283,000 in funding so far, over 1,100 backers. It is doing incredible.
It sounds so much more impressive in Canadian.
Of course, it always sounds bigger in Canadian dollars, right? And it has got 70 hours still to go. So now you're going into the back end hockey stick. So definitely, most definitely, you'll go over the 300,000 mark. How far over? I guess keep our fingers crossed. I guess we'll see. But just want to.
We'll see. We got a couple of exciting things left to unveil as well. So it's going to be an exciting kind of last 72, 48 hours. We'll see what happens. I'm excited.
Yeah, some more goodies.
Snapships is an interesting one for me because it's, in a lot of ways, it is a game that I have wanted to make for a very long time. And when I met the inventors of Snapships, we were actually comparing notes about who came up with like modular spaceship concepts and what sorts of stuff. And like, we totally just kindred spirits and we hit it off right away. I got the toy in 2020 when it came out, built some stuff, tagged them on Instagram, and we just went from there.
That's crazy how these things come together sometimes, eh?
Yeah, it was weird. It turned out like we pitched them a few different ideas for board games because I told them, of course, like, yeah, I've built some awesome models with your stuff, but I'm actually a game developer. And they were like, well, it's funny because we started off trying to make a game for Snapships and got so into the weeds with the toy that we just set it aside. But if somehow in the small world and we found each other.
Oh, that's amazing.
And now we're here and we've got it on Kickstarter, and yeah, I couldn't be happier. It's a sweet game.
When I was setting your intro, too many titles to mention, I wasn't kidding. I mean, I'm going to say some of them here. We got Buffy the Vampire Slayer board game, Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball Z board game, Evil Dead 2, Gemini Gauntlet, Legacy of Mana, Star Trek Alliance, Shadowrun, Sprawl Ops, Terminator Genesis. I mean, you've done a lot. Right. And you were just saying before you went on air, 6 years, what shocked me that you've only been in the industry for 6 years.
It's been a busy 6 years.
You've cranked out a lot. So how did you even get into this industry? Like, where did this all kind of begin for you?
So the origin story of Lynnvander Studios is actually not my story to tell. That's my business partner, Tommy. I'm actually a second wave addition to the company. He started it in 2014 on a dare to make a board game. He was playing a lot of Betrayal at House on the Hill and a lot of Arkham Horror. Yeah. And he was like, oh, I really love Arthurian stuff. Wouldn't it be great if we just had a game that was like this, but Arthurian? And they did Albion's Legacy. They put it on Kickstarter. He will tell you that if you can make a mistake for how to do a game on Kickstarter, he's made it. So lots of things went wrong with Albion's Legacy. Very first printing, they scrapped and reprinted the entire game out of pocket, which was an enormous undertaking.
Oh boy.
They got a lot of goodwill from it. They had just kickstarted their second game, Sherwood's Legacy, which was a Robin Hood tie-in. Around 2015, I think they kickstarted that one.
Yep.
I joined the company in 2016 when Tommy met the owner of Jasco Games, who was like, I have the Buffy license. If you care so much about Albions, maybe you should work on a licensed game for me. So he landed Buffy, and around the same time, I joined the company as a graphic designer. We actually had 5 staff back in 2016, a number of young wannabe designers, great guys. But I think for a lot of them, it was more than they were really ready to take on at that stage in their lives. And so I came on as graphic designer and was, I was working in software at the time. So I had a really good foundation to kind of launch any kind of board game freelancing off of. And I was just there like part-time kind of doing graphic design and illustration. So Buffy was the first sort of big licensed project I worked on. And my role in that project was like, I did a little bit of game development on it, but largely I was doing user interface and graphic design stuff, which is my main role now at Lynnvander.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of growing pains over a couple of years. 2016 through 2019 were pretty rough. Most of the people in the company left. So in 2019, it got down to just basically Tommy and I, and we said, well, we both like doing this a lot still. We don't quite have enough bandwidth to keep doing this in the capacity we'd like. And then it was amazing. We've been talking to Catalyst Game Labs for a while, and got on this whole thing about doing Shadowrun Sprawl Ops with them. They had this wonderful game from a brand new designer, unpublished designer, Dylan Bertolo at the time. It was a great game. It had some problems in the end game. It was a little bit too push your luck, a little bit too punishing in some ways. And it desperately needed a user interface pass. But we came on and we did some late stage development at the request of Catalyst, met Dylan, hit it off right away. We negotiated with Catalyst to make a co-op version of Shadowrun Sprawl Ops, which became a Kickstarter exclusive that we just added in.
Oh, cool.
And then in the process of testing all that content we were doing for Sprawl Ops, Dylan tried on my company blazer with the crest on the back.
Okay.
Just as a joke. It was sitting on a chair in the room, and he was like, oh, this looks nice, and puts it on. And Tommy looks over from the couch and goes, we were talking afterwards. This isn't the worst idea. And we hired him next month, basically. Wow. And now it's just the 3 of us. We're rocking.
So you start off with a company that had a number of employees. Then as those employees start to move on to other things, and you come on board to basically fill in some of these gaps that are starting to show up in the company. And then from there, that evolves into you guys becoming 3 partners.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep. So Buffy did very well for us early on. And then it was just like, well, okay, you've done one licensed game. I guess you can be trusted with another. And it just kind of kept like, oh, if you can do that one, that's a step to get the next one, and so that get the next one and get the next one. So we've worked with probably 7 or 8 pretty big publishers at this point. We've done work with Jasco. We've done work with Catalyst. We've done work with WizKids. We've done work with Riverhorse. We're now working with Gale Force 9. They're kind of the main one that we're doing work for at the moment. We just did Doctor Who Don't Blink and Pathfinder Level 20 with them.
Wow.
Which both are great smaller box games. And we've got a couple of other projects in the queue from them coming out. Starfinder Pirates of Skydock was just announced as well, which is a multiplayer heist game set in the Starfinder universe.
How do you guys how do these, for people who are listening and have no idea how these things can come together? Like, is this you guys pitching people at some of the cons? Is it them approaching you? Like, I guess now you're probably getting approached more now than you're approaching others per se. But at the beginning, how did you guys kind of like hustle this up? Is it literally taking an idea to a studio saying, hey, I think we can match these things up?
So a lot of the stuff we're working on now probably had a 3 to 4 year lead time of building relationships and just grinding everything. I mean, honestly, we're still doing a lot of sort of daily grind to work on all these projects, and still looking for more people to work with, and starting to pivot away from that a little bit now, starting to get into our own publishing stuff, because having done so many different licensed games in the last 6 years, and having made so many pitches for so many different licensed games, we have a lot of designs we really like that we haven't done anything with. They just, no one wanted that pitch. Okay, well, it's going to live in the binder for a while. And then, every so often you look through that binder and you go, that was a really cool idea. Publisher didn't want it for that license that they're currently holding, but we should do something with that. So we're starting to go back and mine our shelf, our back catalog, starting to kind of dig through those ideas. But when you're in the stage of like, starting out as a developer and you're just working for whichever publisher has whatever license, or you'll kind of take anything you can get. I've worked on licenses I love. I've worked on licenses I don't love. It's everything in between. But ultimately, I think the most important thing is just like, we're really focused on making the best experience we can with whatever license we're working with. We do all the research. We really try and ask, what is it that fans like about that licensed property, and how can we make a really compelling game that's really accessible for people out of that property? And that's usually where we go.
Are you guys doing like focus groups and things like that as well, or?
Sometimes, yeah. We've got a pretty decent group of people who are following Lynnvander Studios now.
Yeah.
We also maintain a Discord server with all of our playtesters. We have a pretty decent playtest community now that gives us feedback on a lot of these designs. So, yeah.
And then of your portfolio, how much of it is having to be brought in to kind of fix kind of a design and make it work with a property versus coming in fresh with like a completely new design that you guys have created? Like, what's that balance look like?
So I would describe Lynnvander Studios as a full service design studio. We've done every part of the process at various points for various clients. Some of our best work has been designed from ground up. It's much more difficult to take an existing game and adapt it in some ways, because you have a very interesting set of constraints to work with, and sometimes that can be amazing creatively, but other times it's like, well, this didn't really fit the IP super well in the first place. How do we adapt that? Largely, it's been us pitching concepts to publishers, because publishers are typically looking for more designs. And if they have licenses, that's just money sitting, burning a hole in their pocket, right? They've got to pay their yearly minimums and so on. So why not make more properties using the license while they've got it? But other times it's been like, oh, it would be great if we could get that. My cats are apparently trying to Zoom bomb us here. They're having a real wrestle. Get out of here. Shoo. All right. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
A little bit crazy at the moment, I think. So yeah, it's
more like your own titles you guys are bringing forward. Is there ever been one where someone's approached you to say, hey guys, like, we need your help, can you work with this? And a time it worked well and a time it didn't? Like, is there ever a time you're like, guys, there's nothing salvageable here? And has there been other times where we're like, oh yeah, no, we can, this is going to be more of a tweak? Or
yeah, largely it's been, so we've done everything from initial concept through initial design. We've done the playtesting, the development, the graphic design, because we'll do all of that in-house.
Yeah.
If we need illustration, we'll hire out freelance artists for that, because we are a small team. But then basically our process generally stops when we do everything up to manufacturing files, and we just send you everything. And we say, give this to the Chinese printer of your choice and press go.
Wow.
If you'd like us to look over proofs and make sure that it's all come out well on the other end, we're happy to do that too, because it's our project. We want to see it succeed. But we've done some projects, we've done all of those steps. Some projects we've done some, but not others. It really depends on the publisher's vision in most cases. And there's also been times where we've worked directly with licensors themselves to bring stuff onto the market, right? Which is how Snapships is a thing now.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll see a license that maybe hasn't even thought about doing a board game, and you'll approach them and say, hey guys, like we got an idea on how we can take this license. What's an example of that where you've done that?
So Snapships is obviously, like, we did that with them.
Yeah.
We kind of discovered after the fact, actually, that they had a board game in mind. But other stuff that was like that, we did a bunch of work with Dynamite Comics back in 2018. We did Reanimator board game with them based on their comic book adaptation. And we also did a Red Sonja board game with them. And actually that one has some crossover content with Albion's Legacy, which is kind of fun. It's in the same kind of game system universe. So that's one where they actually Dynamite discovered us. We didn't discover them. They discovered us, saw that we'd done some decent games on Kickstarter, and they were like, "Oh, these guys have made a bunch of products that are kind of like what we think we might like.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if they're available, and we'll do a board game for us." And they had some ideas about like, "Oh, we want to do a Red Sonja adventure game. We don't want to do a card game. We don't want to do a game that's like full of miniatures, but we want to really get into the exploring that world." Yeah. In a kind of boxed experience. So we agreed on like, okay, well, what's the best price point that's going to work for you? How big a game should it be? All this stuff. And then we basically just built it to spec at that point. We came up with some concepts for how to make that game, pitched it to them. They were into it, and there we are.
I can imagine as a design studio, because the incubation period is so long, right? From when you start a project till when it's finally at the door. Yeah. You must have to have a lot of stuff going at the same time, right? In different stages.
Oh,
so
it's,
that from a monetary level, there's always income kind of coming in to feed the engine, so to speak, right?
Despite our best efforts to do that, I would describe it as a business model that is very feast and famine. You get projects that, well, here's the thing, like any licensed game is just, there are all kinds of levels of approvals. There are all kinds of levels of, there's so many more people that need to sign off on a thing, right? When it's a licensed property. It's, for us, we're the design studio being hired by the publisher who also has to talk to the licensor. So there's actually two separate parties that we have to interface with beyond just like, if we're designing a game ourselves, we just make it, send it to China. Mm-hmm. But there's actually three parties that have to coordinate what they're doing in this relationship. And if any of them run into snags at any point, that project can be delayed for who knows how long.
Got it.
Right. So you just on the sheer statistics of that, you need to have a bunch of things going at any given time that you'll anticipate one to two of them to be stuck at some stage waiting on something or other, waiting on someone or other, that you just need to have all those kind of channels going and be able to switch between them. So it can be really stressful that way.
Yeah.
But it can also be really invigorating because you're like, oh, I got 4 awesome games I want to work on. Which one do I need to work on right now? Because that's the one that's not blocked.
I guess when you're talking about your desire as a company potentially to gravitate towards now even doing some of your own titles and self-publishing some of your own titles where you're not partnering up with some of these companies. On one side, when you have the licensee you're working with, it's on their dime, right? So they absorb a lot of the risks, so to speak. But at the other hand, as you said, there with all the approvals and so forth, the incubation time could be a lot longer than, doing your own game, which is going to be self-funded, but obviously with Kickstarter, that helps with cover a lot of the self-funding, but there's still development and so forth goes into that. But you can crank those out much faster, right? Because you know what you have, and it's just getting it skinned right and kind of getting it out the door.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can see how maybe doing both as a business model is going to probably help you guys kind of balance things, so to speak, right?
That's really the writing on the wall that we saw, especially come 2020 when we entered lockdown. It was the first kind of 8 months of lockdown where no one really knew how long it was going to last. All the clients we were working for that we had projects on the go basically were like, okay, maybe just pause that right now. We don't know when we'll ship it, so we don't know when we'll start selling it. So it doesn't help them. Like they can't, guarantee their finances to make it a good move for them. So a lot of those projects got paused. And then all the various relationships at any given time, we might be talking to 3 or 4 other clients and figuring out what might be coming down the pipe next. All of those were like, okay, well, that's all gone too, because they don't want to do anything right now either. They don't know what's going to happen. So March 2020 was like a giant reset button for all of us in our company. Like everything we were working on was just like, nope, that's paused. What do we do? And we really just took that opportunity to look back at our shelf of pitch designs and look back at games that we had worked on that we had never published or found homes for. Some of them we had pitched and publishers kind of liked them, but never really found a good place. And we just took a few of those games and said, you know what? We know enough now about how all of these publishers are doing their various printing, logistical, marketing, all of those steps. We should just do that ourselves, even if it's a small time focus for now, just because we like these games and we want to see them out there, but also because we've got nothing better to do right now. So, like, why not?
And even still, I'm thinking like even if it's not a $1 million campaign, even if you're in the six figures, because you control everything, your profitability still might be higher, right?
And you don't even need a six-figure Kickstarter campaign to make a little bit of money. Like, we published it's actually just finished coming out of the printers. We printed it locally in Guelph, Ontario, actually.
Wow.
Our Legacy of Mana role-playing game setting guide. It's a 300-page setting guide for 5th edition. It's a brand new setting with a whole bunch of new mechanics for time travel and some other cool stuff. We've got anti-magic and time travel. That's a project that we put on Kickstarter. It funded decently well. I think it did 60 or 70,000, something like that. Like, printing locally in Canada meant we didn't have to pay ocean freight, which is fantastic. Obviously, the cost of manufacturing is a lot higher, but even still, the turnaround time is just incredibly fast because you're not waiting 60 days plus unknown delay for ocean freight, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to deal with customs. So, that's a great little project. It doesn't have to be amazing. And it's a setting that we've been consistently running content for at Origins and Gen Con now, and does very, very well at those cons. It has a pretty dedicated little following.
It's interesting to see industries pivot, right? So as you're just describing now, your company pivoting, and even outside the board game industry, I think most industries have had to pivot, right, with COVID.
I would think.
But even if you look at this one, like I'm seeing more print and play campaigns, right? Like with the freights going through the roof, people are looking at the model and rerunning the math, right, and saying, okay, wait a second here. Your example is a great one of that. Yes, my printing cost per unit is going to be way higher, but once I put into my ocean freight and work all that into customs and so forth, I mean, I'm actually at a cheaper cost, right? You're seeing, digital people doing Kickstarter with digital assets where there is no physical stuff, right? Yep. It's just essentially your intellect and your time that you're charging out for, but again, ability to make a lot more profit. Maybe not as large of a campaign, but when you have no cost going into that campaign other than time and your know-how, the math starts looking very, very favorable. It's interesting.
I also see, along the same vein, actually, I see a lot of campaigns now for 3D printable stuff, right? Terrain, figures, all of that. Because that's, again, just entirely digital assets. You just sculpt and creative output and deliver, right? Optimized for 3D printing.
Yeah, we had I can't remember her name now. She does 3D printed towers. And her whole thing is she creates towers without the supports, right? So you can print the tower with no supports, no having to trim or anything.
Yeah.
And the Kickstarters are just for digital files, right? So you're just buying the license of digital file. And those campaigns are in the six figures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as it turns out, lots of people own 3D printers now. There's a real scene for it. I mean, we're giving away some STL files for prototype snapships parts on our Kickstarter because
that's awesome.
We got those files, and otherwise they're just gathering dust somewhere, metaphorically.
I did that on a prior campaign where a Night Squirrel's Yoked Forest, right? One of the objectives we were originally going to do was minis, and then we ended up just cutting it because we're like, what are we doing? Why are we creating minis for a game that's a casual game? People aren't getting this for the minis, they're getting it for the game, but we had already created all the files. So we end up just giving them out for people to print their own 3D models if they want to have their characters be the actual 3D characters of those cartoon squirrels. They could. So it's a cool way, even if you have stretch goals and maybe you have an intention to do certain things where you're going to have different models and so forth in the game, and it turns out you don't hit those levels, well, then you can still provide those files to people maybe to do on
because your sculpting is a sunk cost at that point. You've paid a few $100 to have that figure sculpted. That's just a loss, so why not get some goodwill out of it, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Your co-op of this X-Wing that you're known for, what got you to think, hey, I'm gonna create my own co-op version, I'm gonna put it there for free? Like, what made that happen?
Yeah, that's a wild ride. So I've played a lot of collectible and constructible miniatures games. Some of them competitively. I played Star Wars miniatures starting in like 2004 or 2005 when it was brand new from Wizards of the Coast. I played Monster Apocalypse competitively for a while. I've played a lot of them. But there's always that moment in the lifetime of a collectible or expandable game where the player base for it dries up and people move on. And I was so enamored with X-Wing. I'd played a few hundred games of it at that point.
Yeah.
Um, I was so enamored with first edition X-Wing that I was just like, it'd be really great if this could just become a boxed board game that I could take off the shelf in the future, not necessarily have to worry about having like dedicated X-Wing players who know every card to be able to play against. It would be great if you could have an automated opponent. And around the same time, a friend of mine ran a local website for our X-Wing club, basically. And he was talking about making a campaign to put up on there as a free download. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. He showed me his draft. I wasn't terribly impressed. I was like, you got some good ideas here, but like nobody's going to want to play the Imperial player if all the shine of the campaign is to be rebels. But I took this idea and I ran with it. And I said, well, how hard could it be to automate the Imperial ships and be able to play that cooperatively? Turns out players make some highly optimized decisions in X-Wing, which are kind of difficult to model. But if you find a way to bake all that complexity down into something a human can read easily, actually you can get them to be pretty good. So Heroes started off as an AI thing first. We made this just basically AI opponent that's, this is the book here actually. There's an AI opponent that's just got this little card thing that it runs off of. And it's just literally, I'll show you the card because it's kind of fancy. There's a picture of the card. It's just got this little card that's like a chart of all the maneuvers it can do.
Okay, cool.
And turned out to be extremely easy to operate. So Heroes was just like, okay, well, if we've got this, let's put a light RPG system on top of it and make some scenarios. There's 15 scenarios in that book. And you literally, you're a squadron of rebel pilots reliving the movies. You're splashing TIE fighters left and right and leveling up and getting to be like, your own personal Wedge Antilles, Luke Skywalker ace pilot. And it turned out to be extremely popular. I put it up on our club's website and it was all over Reddit and Board Game Geek and everywhere in a couple of days. It's had tens of thousands of downloads. I know it's been translated into a bunch of languages. People always were asking me like, oh, can I put it in French or whatever? I'm like, yeah, do whatever you want. This is my gift to the community because I enjoy X-Wing so much.
Oh, yeah.
FFG never knew what to do with it. I did show it to their developers at the time, Alex Davey and some of the other people at FFG. But that's not how FFG operates as a company. They don't really do outside submission. They kind of come up with their concepts internally and then just develop them.
Yeah.
So
they didn't slap you with a cease and desist or anything like that?
Oh, no. Well, I wasn't making any money off of it. It was all free. Just download this PDF. Here you go.
And quite frankly, extends the life of their game too, right? So that's not bad.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure. They didn't really know what to do with it and didn't want to touch it, but WizKids did. So then we made Star Trek Alliance based off of Star Trek Attack Wing.
Yeah.
That project was 4 years in the making.
Wow.
I pitched it to them at Origins in 2016, actually, the first year I was with Lynnvander. We were showing them 2 other games, both of which they have since passed on. But we showed them 2 other games in this meeting. And at the end of it, Tommy asked them if they would be interested in a cooperative version of Attack Wing. And they said it couldn't be done. And then we just said, well, actually, it has been done for X-Wing. We've done this. Would you be interested? And it went from there. They had a lot of problems with their own supply line and manufacturing, getting tooling moved around and stuff. So it was delayed quite a lot. Came out finally in 2020 or 2019, somewhere in there. And now there are 2 more on the way. So 2 more box sets for Attack Wing. So if you like the concept of Heroes of the Aturi Cluster, but owning a massive X-Wing collection is daunting for you, you can buy a starter set box, $40 or $50 purchase that is just the ships you need to play 2-player co-op flight path and play Star Trek.
That's crazy. It's so cool.
It is crazy
to see an idea go viral and then that then be used as a base of credibility for future projects that you're pitching, right? Like that's amazing.
Part of the amazingness of Snapships was actually that when they learned that I had done Heroes of the Aturi Cluster, they looked me up. They're like, oh, so not only has this guy built Snapships, but he's also played a ton of X-Wing, and we were thinking about doing an X-Wing style game.
Yeah,
like some of the freeform movement template type stuff. somehow he's just the right guy. Like, it's just weird.
It just goes to show, right? If you have creativity, you put it out there, and you never know what could come back, right? And it's sometimes putting things out without the expectation of something coming back when you get the most benefit.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yep.
No,
Yeah, I never really thought of Heroes of the Aturi Cluster as being like a calling card / portfolio piece to get into the industry, but in retrospect, it kind of was. Certainly, it taught me a lot of stuff about how to lay out files. Like a big part of, I was doing web work at the time in software, so I wasn't doing much print layout. Heroes was almost a way for me to teach myself like Adobe InDesign and learn how to actually lay out stuff for print properly. Data merging and all of that stuff, and now that's just standard for doing any kind of prototyping.
Yeah, I finally caved on because I knew a little bit about InDesign. I used mainly Illustrator and Photoshop, and but I had read somewhere that if you're not using InDesign to do your cards, you're crazy, right? Especially if you have like a thick deck where you have different elements or combinations and permutations of each other. I mean, data merge does all the heavy lifting for you on that, right? Like, so we've got,
let's see, I think we've now used that process on probably 15 different games. Snapships alone has I don't know, a couple hundred cards, and I'm sure there'll be hundreds more. Those are all 100 column wide spreadsheet that's just all data merged. Everything is templated, so it's
I find with playtest, I mean, obviously you can use you know, the Steam games, you know, Tabletop Simulator, things like that for prototyping. But if you're doing physical prototypes, which I like to bring to game night because people are very tactile, they like to, you know, hold cards and so forth. You take your feedback, I go home, I change the spreadsheet and hit print, and bang, you know, it printed all my new cards and I re-sleeve them. So you still can't get away from automating that cutting yet. I wish I had some kind of a punch or something I could use for that, but it's still pretty handy. So what's next for you guys? Like, so, I mean, you've obviously got a lot of projects underway. I know you're going to Gen Con up and coming. Can you talk about what you guys are going to be, you know, profiling at Gen Con, or kind of what's next up for you guys?
So Snapships Tactics Kickstarter will be ending soon. We'll be taking late pledges at Gen Con, I suspect. We've also got the first two projects that were born out of our 2020 adventures. So the first is a game that's actually near and dear to me. This is a design I started quite some time ago called Gemini Gauntlet.
Oh, cool.
It is a space asteroid racing game. It's like 6 players, 2 to 6 players, simultaneous play largely. So it's pretty fast, and it's a racing game. That's near and dear to me. Our Legacy of Mana setting guide is also going to be for sale at Gen Con. And then the third one that's kind of coming out later this year, it's in manufacturing right now, is Minotaur.
Oh, cool.
This is a small box game we had on GameFound. It's a nice little tight co-op with an 8-bit sort of ancient Greek art style. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's an original design by, it's actually a design we didn't do in-house. That's the first time we've ever published someone else's design. We liked it so much.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, we signed it. We signed another designer and published their game. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Who knows? It was really just an experiment to see what it would be like.
Yeah, well, and that's what you gotta do, right? You gotta try different things. You gotta, you know, test. I mean, I've tried to do as much as I can. GameFound, Kickstarter, using different types of pledge managers, different types of social media amplification companies. You know, trying as many different things as I can. You know, and as long as I can kind of break even, I'm happy, because then I can walk away with the learning, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
You know, the hope is if you can do enough of those iterations, eventually you'll get to kind of a formula that kind of works for you as a company, right? Yeah,
definitely.
Well, Josh, I want to wish you all the best on this coming year. Congrats again on Snapships. I mean, you guys have just got to be tickled pink. And we'll get you back on the podcast to talk about the next, maybe the next title you guys self-publish. We'll get you back on the podcast and chat about that.
Sounds good.
All right, man.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, James.
Take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.